putting the subject content aside.
Mm.
Um, this is quite a broad question, but what kind of things makes a good historian in terms of how they think and approach sources?
Well, this might sound strange, but I think creativity and
Mm.
empathy are two of the big things.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cambridge from the Inside. Today we're here with a new guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Pedro Ramos Pinto. I am a professor of contemporary history in the history faculty, and I've been a fellow in history at Trinity Hall for 11 years now.
Brilliant. So today we're here to be talking about history interviews, as it's that time of the year. Everyone's heard now of whether they've been invited for an interview or not, and people are quite keen and preparing for them and looking forward to them in one way or another. And we've got Pedro here with us today to talk about history interviews for history specifically. So to start it off, Pedro, do you have any general advice for Cambridge interviews?
Um, Very general, I think just be yourself,
Mm,
take time to think, don't rush answers, and show us who you are. I mean, this is an opportunity for us to get to know applicants better. Meant to be a platform for students to shine. I see
mm,
our job as helping in that.
no, yeah, yeah. I think be yourself is. It's I think in a variety of aspects in life, it's the advice we always receive, but then it's all the gut instinct for a lot of
It,
people, especially young people, is obviously that's not going to work. So what would
it's
you?
yes, it's the hardest, but it is genuine. What
Mm,
I mean by that is, there's a reason why students have applied here, why they want to come and study history, and that's what we want to see. We want to see why they have a passion for history, what do they think about the subject, why they're interested in it, and how they, so we can get a glimpse in how they will be as students at university.
mm. Yeah, I think because we were talking a bit before about exams and how students are very much trained to be good at exams, and I think when you have an exam in front of you, and the advice isn't to be yourself. So, um, what kind of things and what ways are an interview, like a history interview, is different to what a student is expected to do in their history school exams? If you see what I mean?
Yeah, I think the history school exams in many ways are there for students to show what they've learned over the year.
Mm,
To a certain extent, it's also asking them to show how they think, but perhaps to a lesser extent. And here in an interview, we're interested much more in how you think.
mm,
So we're probably not going to ask many questions about content. I don't know my list of king and queens, and I'm terrible with dates. Um, but when I ask a question of an interviewee, I'd like to say, okay, even if you might not know this period or this bit of history, if we give you the materials, if we give you the basis of, this is this time, this is this event, how would you go about thinking about it? Um, it's really a way of seeing how you take a problem,
mm,
how you break it apart, how you look at the different constituent parts of it, and how you build an argument around it, and how you explain it to us, the interviewers,
mm,
and therefore showing how you are at tackling historical problems.
mm. Nice. Um, and a bit more specifically about history
Mm,
interviews. Could you enlighten us a little bit about what history
mm.
interviews at Cambridge are like?
Yes, they're slightly different across every college,
Yeah.
so I can speak mostly about what we do here at Trinity Hall.
Mm,
So students have two interviews, but they're both history interviews. So it's
yeah.
not a general one and a history one. They're both history ones. They're both with two sets of historians.
Mm,
And so they cover the subject in both. But there is no set pattern.
Okay.
We read with great care the work that the students submit, the personal statements, and we will base our questions around that. We'll make sure that we don't cover the same ground in both interviews. We might, in some instances, give applicants an historical document or an historical image as a way of starting a conversation about a topic. We do that in the interview over Zoom.
Nice. So a student can expect to be expected to, at least in one of the interviews, to analyze a source during the interview.
Yeah, we've done that in the past. We don't always do it, but
Yeah.
we sometimes do it. So be prepared, I
Yeah.
think, is to not that there's much preparation, it's that you can do, because we want to do these things in a way that they would require no prior knowledge. So it's a level playing field for everyone.
That's interesting, because I think I can hear students' parents thinking, oh, well, if you have a history interview, make sure you're very sharp on your historical knowledge. I think I can imagine some people who aren't as well versed or don't know so much about the Cambridge interviews will think it's quite similar to something like what's that show? University Cambridge,
University Challenge.
University Challenge.
Not at all. That is exactly what it's not like.
Okay.
Partly because if you think about it, across A levels, international baccalaureate, and all other kinds of school leaving examinations, applicants will be doing very, very different types of history. Some people will be doing 20th century world history. Some people will be doing medieval English history. And so everyone will know different things. So we're not here to test knowledge. That's why we try to ask questions and build out interviews in a way that it speaks to the students' interests and their knowledge, but more importantly, is a way to think more broadly, and probably asking them to think about the materials they've been doing in A level or for their school leaving exams in ways that they're not asked about in school.
So for those who are quite curious to know, putting the subject content aside, this is quite a broad question, but what kind of things makes a good historian in terms of how they think and approach sources?
Well, this might sound strange, but I think creativity and empathy are two of the big things. History is about being able to imagine how someone who's extremely different from us in a different period, in a different region of the world, might have seen the world and how they might have acted accordingly. And for me, that's an act of creativity. It's not unrooted in evidence. It is very much rooted in evidence, but it's still an act of creativity and empathy. So it requires us to, as you were saying earlier, stepping outside our own values, stepping outside our own place in history, and trying to recreate and think about how it might have been for people elsewhere.
That's interesting, and it's a breath of fresh air to hear, and an academic in history to say that, because I think at least from my time at university, I met a lot of people, historians, who, I guess, what would you say to an applicant who, and this reminds me of the historians that I knew, who would kind of approach history always from their perspective, but never really using their empathy, but kind of, I'm not sure if I'm articulating this well, but sticking from their perspective when they're analyzing sources, and then which could lead to, I guess, one thing that it could lead to, amongst many things, is not handling these historical pieces of evidence with particular care. I don't know if you see what I'm saying.
No, absolutely. I think if you look at the past only through the lens of the present, it's going to tell you something, but it's going to be fairly narrow. Of course, we're going to make judgments about the past. We're going to make value judgments about the past, moral judgments. That's perfectly understandable, and we should. But that's only going to take us so far. I think if history is an exercise in understanding, we have to think about why people held values so different to ours, including why do we hold our own? They're also different to theirs, but also understanding why they made their choices in the past according to what system of values. Why something that might appear extremely funny to someone in the 18th century, but actually rather cruel or unusual to us today, why was that funny to them? Or something that might appear highly virtuous and moral to someone, say, in the 19th century, incarcerating people in workhouses. Some people might have felt they were doing that from an entirely moral point of view. We can say it's wrong. It doesn't get us very far in understanding why those people felt that way and why they acted accordingly. So that's what I mean about being creative, or being able at least to think in someone else's shoes and trying to find the evidence with which to do so.
So, not to sum it up in a brute way, but there is there is a skill where you want to harness in trying to take off your shoes and put on different pairs of shoes. And
Absolutely. And I'd say also that's something that you can take away from the interview, is also use that idea when you're thinking about the questions that you're given in an interview.
Because I guess this, when you're wearing your shoes, it's like a top-down approach. But if you can try to embody other people's perspectives, you're really trying to fill in their shoes. And then, as you say,
now you might ask, okay, that might be very stressful for someone. Oh, how could I do that in an interview if I'm being asked about a period of history or an event I know very little about? And I just want to reassure people, we don't expect knowledge. In a way, this is a kind of sandpit area. When we're discussing these things in the interview, it doesn't matter if someone doesn't quite know the period or at all. It's more about the process and the thinking process behind it than the actual content, if you will, the building blocks that matter in that moment. When we get to studying history in university, when you're doing the reading, when you've got lectures, we're giving you the building blocks and also helping you develop that critical thinking. But in the interview, it's really, is in a way is the kind of free hit.
Nice. That's really interesting. And would I be right in thinking that your ability to critically think is also being assessed in the interview, or is that what we've also been talking about in terms of, I guess, the stuff that we've been talking about?
I mean, that's what the interviews are about. Okay. It's the exams, the A levels, the IB exams are going to test applicants on their knowledge of the courses they're doing. Here in the interview, what we can do is to try and get at see how people think about subjects. I think often when we say critical thinking is such a vague term, people wonder what it is. But essentially, is this? If we give you some building blocks of a new concept, a new situation, something you've not come across before, how do you think about them? So one thing I'd say to anyone doing an interview is don't just tell us the end of a story. Tell us how you get there. So don't just give us the conclusion. Also talk about what steps you're thinking about in order to reach that conclusion.
So the next question that we have here is how can students prepare for their history interviews?
Oh, well, there's the basic stuff. Okay. If get some sleep, rest. I know that's easy to say from my end, and the logistics. Make sure you are somewhere comfortable with good internet connection, etc. I think generally it's reread your personal statement, reread the work you've submitted. And just have a look over about, not in detail, but remind yourself of what you've been doing for A level in history. As I said, we're not going to be asking you we might start conversations there. So it's good to have that present, although we're not going to be asking the same questions you'd be asked in school exams or anything. But we might use that as the beginning of a conversation.
Can you expand on that a little bit, and in what way they might be different, those questions that the student might have in a school exam and what they might be
Um,
asked in an interview?
well, we have to have something to go on.
Yeah.
So normally we will take something that we know the students are doing, and we will ask a little bit about it to see how they're engaging with that topic and how they're thinking about it. And we might want to then say put that knowledge in conversation with something different that we bring to the interview. So it's not a test. We're not aiming to see if students have learned their lesson particularly well. That's the job of the school. But it's a stepping stone to get into those conversations about critical thinking that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things I want to remind interviewers is that it's sometimes, we'll start asking something and applicants will say, actually, that's in my A-level program, but my teacher was ill and we haven't got to that bit yet, or there's been a change in program. And that's fine, as long as they tell us in the interview, say, okay, let's go somewhere else then.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Nice, yeah. And it's important for students to know, or upcoming interviewees to know, that they should have the confidence to be able to to bring up something like that.
Yeah, exactly. We want to be able to help our applicants show themselves in their best light. So they can help us with that, if need be.
Yeah. And another question that we have quite a lot is, I think this is something that comes up more in the humanities subjects rather than the sciences, which are, I guess, quite black and white, and it's a problem-solving exercise, I guess. But we're wondering, students ask us, is there a certain personality type that Cambridge are looking for, and are historians looking for a certain personality type in the interviews?
Not at all. Because we want people who can think, but we all think differently. There are many routes to good critical thinking, and I think one of the things we want to encourage is having a cohort, having a group of students that are themselves quite different and bring different things to the table. So we're not looking for one particular personality. We want people who are interested in the subject, who are passionate about it, and are willing to think about it. In that sense, if there's one thing that we'd like all our students to be, is open-minded. But that is not reflected in any one single personality type. There are people who are more extroverted. There are people that are quieter. That is not really what we are assessing.
Interesting. So that leads on to my next question, in that students, they also they know that the interviews are 20 to 30 minutes long, quite a short time, especially when you're talking about something like history, which could be an endless conversation on any subject matter. We have students who either feel pressured to be quite extroverted, or be in a debating persona and be quite combative, or other students in an interview, they feel like they have to be exceptionally discerning before they say anything. What advice would you have for students who are trying to work out how to conduct themselves in during an interview, when they're thinking about these different types of ways of approaching history?
Well, the first thing to say is that there's often the misconception that the interview, and perhaps even later supervisions, are meant to be a debate, like a debating club. And that couldn't be further from what we are trying to do. It's meant to be a conversation that goes two ways, and that it's, if sometimes there's a kind of challenge in the question, it's not meant as a challenge to the applicant, is meant as a way to go further and think about something else. And that means we're not expecting one stance of people being more extroverted and others introverted. People are different, and so we completely realize that some people might find it easier to very quickly answer something than others. Often I'd also say, slow down a bit, because it's worth taking time to think about an answer and a problem before blurting out an answer. Sometimes the first thing that comes to our head is not necessarily the best. So take time to build an answer, but also, not too long, because we want to give students the opportunity to cover more ground. And also, I think it's also de-emphasizing the absolute importance of every single thing that an applicant says in an interview. They're not. No one is going to say something amazing with every sentence they utter in an interview. So don't overthink things. Just think a little bit and give an answer that you think is reasonable. It doesn't have to be the end of it. We might then use that as a stepping stone for a next question, to have that conversation. So perhaps looking for a balance between the two of, don't rush out the first thing that comes to your head. But also, it's not the end of the world. Just say what you're thinking at that point, and let's move on.
So that there's no room for perfectionism in interview.
We're not expecting perfect answers, because there are no perfect answers.
Yeah, and I think for some students who have a tendency to overthink, or will be pressured to say something perfect, it's a huge weight off their shoulders to tell them that we're not expecting perfect answers, and we want something sensible, and these are building blocks. These aren't supposed to be one line answers that end the conversation, that we move on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then hopefully a good two-way conversation can develop through.
And most of the time it does. I think most of the time the conversation flows, and actually, students and both applicants and the interviewers go, "Oh my God, is that where the time's gone?"
Yeah, it's always a good sign. So on a similar vein, I think this is quite common with history, where it has a broad range of applicants from all over the country. So some students who will have an interview will come from schools that regularly have Oxbridge applicants and Oxbridge offers, and they'll receive a lot of support from their teachers and their school in preparing them for their history interviews. And a lot of history applicants will come from schools that rarely have many Cambridge applicants, and might not receive as much support as much support with their upcoming interview. I wants to hear from you if for those students who are coming from backgrounds where there aren't as many Cambridge applicants, they'll probably feel like that they're not the specific type of person who Cambridge are looking for, or Cambridge tend to go for, and are they at a disadvantage from coming from a place where there aren't as much success in getting students into Cambridge?
Absolutely not. History students at Cambridge come from a huge range of backgrounds, and we do a lot of work specifically on that, because we want to get past the context in which students learn to get at the person who's standing in front of us. So we do a lot of work in training interviewers and the experience that we have. I've been doing this for over 10 years. And a lot of what we talk about, a lot of what we think about in how we design and conduct the interviews is exactly to try and make them as much of a level playing field as possible, to strip away that context, that differences in context, to give everyone the same chance. And I think you just have to look at the statistics of how Cambridge history and all Cambridge degrees have changed dramatically over the last 30 years to show that's had a massive effect. I think the stereotypes about what a Cambridge student is like, unfortunately, still appear a lot, in films, in TV, and sometimes in the media. But if people come here for open day, if people walk around, talk to our students, they'll see how diverse our student population is in all kinds of ways.
I think this is something we were talking about before, but can the interviews be a level playing field for two students where one of them has had a childhood of going to museums endlessly and another student who didn't go to museums endlessly? Like, can we create an environment where where the interview is a level playing field for those two individuals?
We really try to, and this is why the interviews are not so much about knowledge than about thinking. I think we try to make the interview something that you could engage with successfully, whether all you've had a chance to do is to do your A-level and your history GCSEs and see the things that are around you. It's not as if you can be sheltered from history even walking down the street. And what we'd like to see is that people can use any materials that they have. If they've gone to the British Museum, if they have that chance, that's fantastic. And if they bring something of that into their conversation, great. But it could also be just the road they walk down on the way to school will have as much interesting history for me as the British Museum.
Yeah, exactly. I think something saying before that there's evidence all around you, and there definitely is something about just having a curiosity for people watching is as valuable as having a curiosity of things that are in a museum. And there's no reason to. I can't think of an argument that says that one is more important than the other.
I mean, look around you, and an urban, even a relatively modern urban setting will have links to all kinds of histories that are just as important as, monumental abbeys and castles. So it's look around you and think about history as something all around you, something advice I'd give to everyone who wants to study history here.
And I guess we're breaching onto the topic of like there's something to be said about kind of talking about what you find interesting and what you generally find interesting, rather than kind of following the herd of what is talking about what is supposed to be interesting.
Absolutely, but we want to get at that. What are the interests and passions of each individual applicant? And it's fine if someone gets what brought them to history is the Tudors on TV. Horrible Histories has been amazing in terms of bringing people. That's absolutely fine. Or it might be something that's very particular to them or to their personal history that they found connects with them. We are really open to hearing this. And one of the great privileges of being an interviewer is meeting all these really interesting young people who all bring something different.
Yeah, exactly. That's amazing. And I wanted to also add something we were talking about before in terms of different schools having a lot of support and a lot of knowledge with Oxbridge applications and providing that to their students, and then other schools not having as much support. That was one of the reasons why we wanted to create this podcast, this YouTube channel, is in order to kind of give out all of this advice and all of these materials and resources on YouTube, so that anyone who's applying to Cambridge can have access to them, to I guess our attempt of leveling the playing field to some extent. Another question we have here, something that we've kind of talked a lot about already. Say if we have a student who is quite strongly lacking in confidence for the upcoming interview, in a similar way to imposter syndrome, they just feel like an imposter, even though they have a lot of ability and good grades, teachers believe in them, they write well, they've ticked all the boxes, and they're very curious about history, more important than anything else. What advice would you have to someone who's lacking a lot of confidence when they're approaching the interview?
I mean, they should first of all take confidence in the fact that they're
Mm,
here. They're here because their teachers have confidence in
mm,
them, because they've shown in their academic career at school that they are high achieving.
mm,
So, and everyone's on the same boat. There's no one here that gets asked for an interview that will be substantially different from everyone else in terms of their academic
mm,
uh, trajectory. They should take a lot of confidence from that.
yeah,
Um, it's completely normal to be nervous. Um, you know, it's people want to come to Cambridge. They want to show themselves in the best light. So a little bit of nerves is fine. I tell you what, sometimes not sometimes, we are, as interviewers are also nervous because we want to do well. We want to do all these things that I've been talking about
mm,
of, helping students show themselves in the best light and, give them an opportunity to show how they think about history and their engagement with it. And, we are also a little bit nervous,
mm.
and that's fine. Um, don't be afraid, I'd say to applicants, to tell us, sorry, I'm a little bit nervous, or we'll do our best to put them at ease.
Mm.
I might even tell a couple of naff jokes, but
Yeah, and I think that is good advice too. If you are feeling extremely nervous, to say, because it's a very honest thing to say, and actually helps with the upcoming conversation to say something like that.
Mm.
Um, and I think so. I'd be right in saying that um, we only give interviews to offer interviews to students who we are seriously considering in giving an offer.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that people need to understand is that, yes, pretty much, I'd say, apart from very, very few exceptions, I think everyone we interview would be capable of doing a degree here.
Mm.
Unfortunately, we only have limited
Yeah.
places, so the differences are very fine,
Mm.
and it's no, it's no. It doesn't mean anyone has failed in any way if they end up not getting an offer.
Mm.
It's that unfortunately places are limited, and we have to make really difficult decisions.
Mm.
So, but that also means, if you see it from the other angle, it's that everyone who is here is capable and intelligent, and I'm sure will, whether they come to study history at Cambridge or they go and study history or another degree elsewhere, will do really well.
Mm. Nice. So the next question I've got here is that for a lot of subjects, it's been said that the interviews are in some way supposed to emulate what a Cambridge supervision is like. One of the teaching methods that we offer here at Cambridge. Is that true for history?
Um, yes and no.
Okay.
Uh, I'd say in many ways the supervisions are much easier than the interview.
Okay,
uh,
yeah.
simply because, as we've been talking about,
Mm,
there's not much direct preparation you can do for an interview.
yeah.
Whereas the supervision is different.
Mm,
You go to a supervision after having gone to lectures, after
yeah.
having done reading,
Yeah.
after writing an essay. So it is quite a different thing. But one thing is the same, which is it is meant to be a conversation.
Mm,
It is meant to be a space in which, as well as feedback on particular aspects of writing an essay or the essay that students have submitted, or asking questions about the theme and the kind of derived from the lectures that students might have and they want to talk about further. It's one part of it. But then there's another part, which is also trying using the supervision to engage that critical thinking
mm,
and
yeah.
develop that muscle. Which also, I think, reminds me to say that when we say we want to see students exercising critical thinking, we also realize that that's often not what's emphasized in the school curriculum.
Mm,
So we're not expecting someone to arrive here at interview and being able to do that kind of engagement with history that we'd see in a final year student.
yeah.
it's something that develops. We want to see the beginnings of that, but we don't expect to see it at the same level as a first-year student or a second or third-year student. You know, we don't expect to see Mary Beard being interviewed fully formed in front of us.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the term critical thinking for me, I first discovered that when I was approaching my admissions test, and then my tutor, sixth form, gave me his copy of like a thinking skills book. There's a book about introduction to critical thinking, and the facts are it did really change my life in terms of how I perceived the world. I was just able to kind of take a step back and um, understand the building blocks of my reasoning and other people's reasoning, and it's really helped with very day-to-day decisions, day-to-day.
I've got to get the reference to that book from you. I've never read one like that.
No, yeah,
but I think it's simple. I think the way I define critical thinking, this level, is just that, is about being aware of the concepts that we use, thinking about why you're reaching a particular conclusion, what are the steps that you've used to reach there, what evidence did you draw on, and then always thinking, and I think this is the fundamental thing, are there other possible ways of looking at this?
Yeah.
Are there other possible answers that could be reasonably given to this? Is there other evidence I should look at before coming to a conclusion? And what are the limits of my own, sometimes when it's not possible to find other evidence, what are the limits of my answer?
Yeah, nice. I think I must have been taught stuff like that in English and history, but I don't remember. At the time, I didn't remember ever being taught the stuff that I was learning from this book. And I think the reason why I never noticed that beforehand is because whenever I was taught critical thinking techniques in English or history, it was always, the end goal was always, okay, well, how does this relate to the eligibility, the criteria to get the top grade? Whereas this book, the the critical thinking was the end in itself. Like that was the whole goal, was to improve your critical thinking and nothing more. There wasn't like a grade to aim for. So I guess just that slight pivot of moving my attention and moving the goal of what I was aiming for suddenly made me realize that these kind of skills could be so much more applicable to then just schoolwork.
And I think that's true also in universities. We do have to have exams and assessments, and they can be varied, and some are better than others at eliciting critical thinking. And that's part of the process. But I hope that both in university and in school, that if you have a passion for a subject, you will be thinking about it, not only as a means to an end in the exam, but also more broadly about what it all means, and why is that interesting, or how could we think about the past.
This is a bit of a curveball question, but now that we're on the topic, I've talked to Marcus about this, our director of admissions, who's been present in the other podcasts, and something we've talked a lot about. What advice would you have for a student who's clearly very bright? Their critical thinking is phenomenal in that they're very good at seeing the different systems that exist in society in their lives, and the different games that societies ask us to play, and they view their schoolwork and even their university work as something that I don't know, like it's they don't see the value in it because they see it as, I don't know, like I think you understand what I'm trying to get at.
I think so. What I would say is that A levels, degrees shouldn't be ends in themselves.
Yeah,
they should be tools that we use in order to act upon the world. and hopefully to make it a better place. Now, there's many ways in which we can do that. It could be teaching, or it could be engaging with the world in a much more direct way. There's many. It could be being creative. It could be being inventive. There are many ways in which we can do that. But I hope that, and that's what, as a university teacher, that's what I hope to do. I know that 90% of the students I teach here are not going to go on to be historians like me, but I hope I can, through using the past, help them develop a set of skills to go on and make an impact in the world in whatever way they want.
I guess I guess when students are in those kind of perspectives, they feel like if they were to work really hard for an exam that they think is mundane and meaningless, that they would not be doing it on their terms. But I guess you're saying that they can, that there are things to gain for themselves.
There are always things to gain. And at worst, it can be a hoop that one must go through in order to get where we want to be. But there's always something to be learned from every experience, from every process. It's not a bad thing to be able to deal well with an exam, even knowing that it's not the be all or end all of everything. And, it's just one skill amongst the many that make up our arsenal of ways of dealing with the world.
Yeah, I think that puts it really well, because most people, the issue that we're trying to deal with, most students, is they're afraid that the exams are the be all end all. But then what do we do with the students who know very well that the exams aren't the be all end all, that they will live a happy lives in a variety of different ways, even if they weren't to do well, but they have a huge ability and they're lacking the motivation? How do we motivate those students? And
well, I hope that, if they see that what's beyond the exam is something that they want to do, and that they want to learn and grow with that. I mean, look beyond, look to the sunny uplands, as it were, and to motivate yourself to get there. I didn't particularly enjoy my end of school exams, but by that stage, I had an offer from university that I really wanted to go to, and that motivated me.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, my attendance in school was 70%. It's a different life. Marcus always has this line. He says that sometimes it's in your advantage to conform. That conforming is and I guess in this sense would be conforming to the exam and doing well in the exam.
I hope not always.
Always, yeah. Exactly.
That shouldn't only be the reason why we do things. But yes, I think look to the exams. My daughter is currently at the end of primary school, and I can see her very ready to move on to secondary school, to big school, and enjoy it.
Yes.
And if casting my mind back to all those years ago when I was 17, I felt I was pretty ready to leave the secondary school system, and I couldn't wait to get through the year and do the exams and get on with my life. And that's it. You're going to do the exams, you'll do well, and and the rest of your life awaits you. And hopefully we can be part of that.
Yeah, nice. And this is a massive tangent from history interviews, but now that to do the topic justice, I think in outreach, we come across a lot of students coming from backgrounds that did not fit the stereotype of what Cambridge used to be, in that they're not white, upper middle class male individuals. Some of these students who have imposter syndrome, and we've talked at length about how this is a university that is for them if they are curious about their subject and have the ability. But some individuals have, and rightly so, a strong sense of self-confidence and pride in their identity. And these individuals will view Cambridge and think, I don't want to go to Cambridge because I don't want to. It's for this certain type of group, and I'm not that kind of person. And why would I succumb myself to become like that? And I think to those people, I would say, um, if you going to Cambridge um, doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your identity or who you are to submitting your identity to become a Cambridge student. You can very much go to Cambridge and use the institution for yourself and use it for your own ends, maintaining your identity. And then after your 3 years, use all of the opportunities and experience that you've gained to your own ends. And that's what I'd encourage those individuals to do.
Absolutely. And I'd also say that there's no such thing as a Cambridge student, a typical Cambridge student. And I would encourage people to come and visit us on open days, both before and after interviews. We also have open days for offer holders, I believe.
Yep.
Just come and have a look around and see exactly that there is not one type of Cambridge student. People don't, when they get here, don't all think alike. Far from it, and I'm very glad of it. And people use their time here in completely different ways. I think like other universities, like a city, there are so many different interests, so many different, I'm not talking only about the academic interests, but all the other extracurricular stuff, that I think university can be a really powerful space because of that, because there is a space for people to be who they want to be, or be who they're trying to be. And that is hugely varied. And there's not, this idea that everyone comes out of here in looking like a particular type of person or acting like a particular type of person is completely untrue.
Exactly. That's very right. And the last thing that we have here is when it comes to giving offers to upcoming historians at Trinity Hall, how do we decide who to give offers to?
Well, with difficulty, because we often have many more worthy applicants than we can give spaces. So we take a lot of time to compare notes on the interviews, to discussing the strengths of each applicant, to go back to their paper applications. And we try to make the best decisions we can based on the information that we have. We're looking for that combination of merit and potential. I think the merit in terms of the sense of what people have already achieved in their school career, there's very, very fine distinctions between people who are actually getting here for the interview. So we'll look to that, to what they were able to show us in the interview in terms of their ability to think about history, their engagement with the subject. And we try to make what are inevitably very, very difficult decisions.
And it's a very holistic process. We look at all of the pieces.
We look at everything that the student submitted. We look at notes. That's why we have 4 different people interviewing each applicant, because each of us will see something different. And also with 2 interviews, applicants have 2 chances of showing us themselves. So, and we try to pool all that and come to a decision.
I'm just only coming to realize, so we've said a lot about how there's no specific way of doing a history interview, that we're very open to different types of personalities, different ways of, every student should be themselves. I think that was the first thing that you said. Does that mean there are lots of different, there's lots of different ways of someone, lots of different ways for someone to do their history exams in Cambridge? Like there's not just like a one
Absolutely
approach.
and that's something we talk a lot about, and that we really try to bake into, once people are here, into what we offer in terms of teaching, but also our assessment. When we read exams, I think it's a lot less like a A-level exam or a GCSE exam where there's a set or a fairly set way of answering questions. We say, for instance, we're talking first a first-class exam answer, we really try to emphasize and try to bake in the idea that there's many different routes to achieving a first class.
Interesting. So you read an essay you read two essays that are answering the same question, and they might be completely different.
Completely different. They might take very different routes to the answer. Their arguments might be very different. The kind of evidence they use, the frames and the models of the thinking about history they use might be very different, and they can both be equally as strong.
Well, I think that's quite powerful for students who are in the school system at the moment, because I think most top-end essays will be very similar, at least in the evidence that they'll probably use the same sources, because there's not.
Yeah.
And
so it's very freeing university in that sense, in the studying of all these subjects, and including history, is that it's so much more open. And our job is to help students here deal with that, navigate that, and give them the tools to navigate that openness.
Nice. And lastly, we wanted to know more about yourself. What like your favorite research interests are, and like what research you've done before. And I'm right in thinking that you teach supervisions to historians in Trinity Hall.
Yeah. So like many academics here, I have a dual role. So I'm employed by the university, where I give lectures and seminars and teach masters and PhD students at the university level. But I've also got a role in Trinity Hall, where I'm director of studies, which I sort of support students in their history degrees, and I also give supervisions. So my areas are primarily 20th century European history.
Oh, nice.
Particularly Southern European history. I'm originally from Portugal, so I teach a lot on Portuguese and Spanish and Italian history. And I'm interested in histories of welfare and inequality and social movements. Though I'm a little worried about saying this, because invariably when we look at the applications, myself and Claire Jackson, one of the other historians here, always joke that so many applicants seem super interested in exactly those things that we research. I can understand the instinct, but we're not looking for clones.
No, and I guess on the broader point, it doesn't make your application any stronger if you talk about, if you claim that your interests are very similar to the interests of the academic.
We want to hear about people's actual interests, not hearing ourselves reflected.
That isn't to say that if you do have a genuine interest.
I get it. No, Claire Jackson is a very well-known historian of the early modern period, prize-winning, and of course, many people will have read her books and be excited to come to college where she's teaching. That's perfectly understandable. So if you do genuinely are into these subjects, don't hesitate to put them down.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I've heard students make a conscious choice of choosing colleges where the academics that they know they'll be taught by are that they like the specialisms that they have, and they have an interest in them. So it would be good advice if someone does have an interest of.
Well, that said, that will matter more for the kind of seeing those academics as directors of studies, or in the normal college interactions of the student-run history society and other events. But actually, students are taught by academics, historians from all colleges, all over the place. So that will depend more on the choices that students, once they get here, make about what courses they want to take, about who's going to teach them. So even if you really liked Professor X, but they're in a different college to yours, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be taught by them.
Yeah. So if the academic in your college who you're being taught by is their specialism isn't what you're interested in, that doesn't mean at all that you won't be able to study that.
Oh, absolutely not. So what we do, when we are directors of studies for the students who are doing history here, we only have 3 or 4 historians in each college, so we can't teach everything. So what we do, the director of studies organizes. So if a student is taking, say, medieval history, and we don't happen to have a medieval historian in college, we will find a colleague in another college that will teach them. As I teach students from Trinity Hall and from many other colleges every year.
Well, amazing. Thanks, Pedro. Such an amazing
Thank you,
podcast. I'm sure the applicants will find that really helpful. And thanks to the viewers for watching. If that's on YouTube or on your podcasting platform, if you're preparing for your interview, good luck, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, good luck. Look forward to seeing you. It's the most eclectic collection of books.
Eclectic.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Just not to say random, because you've got English literature, history, poetry, advanced organic chemistry, and Mozart.
Yeah. The Mozart one is his diaries.
Right.
Makes a bit more sense. These are the library didn't have many books. It just kind of shows how makeshift this startup was. So I just got a suitcase and put as many books as I could from mine and brought them over here.
Well, that's a good bookcase then.